And Emma, you were in the middle of a very important flow there about what's happening for early career teachers.
Yes. So I think the first point was just not to feel guilty about whatever you're feeling. You can know, none of us have come through this pandemic unscathed, but we may be feeling a whole range of different emotions, and all of those emotions are okay to feel. I think the other thing to remember, particularly for early career teachers, is that in some ways you are in a unprecedented position, in that you're going into school with experienced teachers who are feeling as unsure about things as you are. And normally as an early career teacher, everybody around you feels much more sure, and you feel like you're the one who doesn't understand what's happening and you need to catch up. And this year, you're going into school with people who also don't know what the year's going to look like. They don't know how the children are going to respond. They won't be able to pull all of the things out of the bag that they've always been able to rely on, because the children will be responding differently. They may have been at home for a very long period of time and have not remembered how to be social around other children, or how to behave in a classroom, or how to respond appropriately to different cues that teachers are used to them responding in a certain way to. So it's a level playing field for early career teachers in lots of ways, in a way that it never has been before. And even further than that, you will have all been trained in a way that really prepares you for online learning, distance learning, for managing children's emotions, because I know that your initial teacher training providers will have been talking to you about bereavement and the potential kind of trauma that the children may be coming to you with. And in some ways, you're going to be better prepared for some things than some really experienced teachers you're working with, and you'll be able to draw on each other's strengths to move forward into this next year that's so uncertain for all of us.
It really is, isn't it? It is something that everybody's learning how to deal with, and I think nobody actually feels that they are experienced in this context. I think we are all, no matter what we're doing, we're all very definitely learning. And I suppose I wonder what you think about, there's a bit of, I'm not a teacher, but I started my career in the financial services sector, and it was par for the course that when you were young, you just worked around the clock. That's what you did. You were just basically there to, give your life over to it. And nobody talked about mental health and well-being. Now, many of us, and for generations really struggled. And I think the parallel with teaching is really striking to me, though teachers have a much greater sense of purpose and a far more interesting job. But people talk about, do you really need to be doing this at the beginning of your career? Surely this is something you pick up later. What do you say to that? How important is it at the outset of a career to pay attention to your well-being?
It's absolutely vital, and I can't stress that enough. It's such an old phrase that it's almost become hackneyed, but it's that whole idea of you put your own oxygen mask on first. Your first responsibility is to be the best teacher you can possibly be for the children in your class, and you can only be the best you can be if you are mentally well and physically well and healthy. So looking after yourself is not selfish, it's so that you can do the very best you can for the children in your classrooms. And that needs to start right on day one, because we all know about habit forming and how that happens. And if you start down a road of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never switching off, never giving yourself time, then it's going to be very hard to dial back from that. So starting every day with the intention of putting yourself first, that's not a selfish thing to do, making sure you're healthy, you're well, and then you can really truly be there for the children, which is ultimately why you're here and why you're training to do what you're doing.
It's really important, that, isn't it? Because a lot of people will talk about feeling guilty if they, have their attention on themselves, like that's somehow taking away from children. But the point that you make, that actually you're going to be able to do a better job for the children, you're going to be a better teacher if you've taken care of yourself. That's not something that everybody intuitively understands. I think sometimes people think it's one or the other, but these things aren't in opposition to each other, are they?
No, they're completely interlinked, and I'm sure all of you have already spent time in schools, either through training or you've started your first job. And you will know that the days where you're not feeling yourself, if it's a cold or if it's that you've not slept very well or you've had a headache, then you won't be as responsive to the children. Your behaviour management might not quite be quite as understanding as you want it to be. Those resources might not quite be ready because you haven't quite got there in time in the morning and had your first cup of coffee and got to the printer before everybody else. Or you know all of these things, and if you're not feeling yourself, then you're not the best teacher you can be. And if you allow a kind of gradual erosion of your mental health, then that will only get worse over time. So spotting and identifying when you need rest and self-care and support really early helps to prevent issues down the line for you and for the children you're teaching.
Well, and that bit about spotting it is so important, because I think it's also very easy for many of us to not recognize actually when we are demonstrating the symptoms. It's often easier to see it in other people. I know certainly my family are great at pointing out to me when they think I might be under strain. Apparently, there's some telltale signs, Emma, shocking that may be to you.
I think my husband might say the same about me, actually. I'm pretty sure that he knows when I've had a bad day at work.
Yeah. But I think it can often be harder for us to recognize that actually, you know, that tightness in my chest, the slight sense of nausea, the fact that I can't get something out of my head, or I can't fall asleep at night very straightforwardly, and that maybe a constellation of those sorts of symptoms are an indicator that I'm not in great shape. And actually, I might need to pause and pay attention to that. I think it can be hard for people to see it in themselves. And if you don't have someone who's close to you who can say, do you know what, Emma, I think maybe you could do with a long walk in a forest. I think it's trickier, but maybe we can share with people some of the kind of symptoms that we commonly see, and we can do almost a check-in with ourselves and see how we're doing.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned some of them. So there is that overly focusing on something. So if something is continually coming back into your mind, particularly if it's something that you don't really have any control over, and there's this kind of idea of a control circle, where if it's something that's outside of your control but you keep fixating on it, that can be a sign that there is something going on. Lack of sleep, an over-reliance on caffeine or alcohol or those stimulants that we sometimes turn to. What else do we have? Tightness in physical changes. So if you're noticing physical changes, weight loss, weight gain, feeling lethargic, all of those types of things that you may notice. Shortness of temper, or feeling that you can't focus with your mind. These are all things that, and they might be very mild. All of these things won't necessarily be really, you know, looming large in your daily life. But if it's happening and you notice it, just stop and pay attention to it and think, maybe I'll pay attention to that, and you'll start to see if other things are happening as well.
Well, and then I can see in the comments there's somebody suggesting that yoga is good, which is one of the things in my week. It's a sort of Wednesday night ritual that allows me to put a space in. But of course, there's lots of things that people can be doing. And some of it is, you know, I can hear my younger self listening to me and rolling eyes thinking, really, you're going to talk about nutrition and exercise and not drinking too much? But these are all good decisions we can make. But I think over and above that, I think finding things that we take real pleasure and joy in and making time for them, not letting them slip off the radar, not putting them to the bottom of the pile, can be really good in terms of restoring our energy. I think accepting uncertainty, you know, for anyone who's just arrived, my Wi-Fi was catastrophic at the start of this call. So I'm now standing in the hall and I can hear the kids, and I don't know if you can hear the kids, and I'm slightly worried about it, but I think, you know, it is what it is. So I can stand here and be stressed about it, or I can just accept it. And I think accepting the situations we're in is often, there's often great power in it to just let go of that degree of concern. And of course, reaching out and connecting with people that we care about, people who we know will energize us, who will validate us, who will listen to us. Because very often just being listened to makes a great deal of difference. So those are some of the things people might think about. And I can see there's some comments from people suggesting other things. There's definitely a big yoga contingent in tonight.
There is a yoga contingent. There's a runner just come up, and I think it is as well about, as you said, finding what your jam is, because The other thing that we can do sometimes, yoga is brilliant, and I totally agree that yoga is great, and it's something that I know makes me feel better, and I'm very bad at prioritizing, so I should prioritize it more. But you can also get into this cycle of, I would feel better if I did yoga, so I must do yoga, but I haven't done yoga this week, and now I'm feeling guilty about not doing yoga as well as all the other things. So I think it was also really important, if yoga is for you, or running, or whatever it might be, is your thing, then go for it. But also don't think somebody else's self-care is your self-care. Find your jam. So if the thing I do prioritize and I do make time for, I have a really good friend who lives up the road from me, and we have made a point of at least once a week having a coffee and going for a walk in the woods local to us, whatever the weather. As all of the time we were allowed to do that. Obviously when we weren't allowed we didn't, but all of the points where we were allowed to just have two of us go for a walk in the woods. Lovely. And that's my release. She's that person you were describing, Sinead, who listens, and I listen to her, and sometimes one of us talks more than the other, but that's my release. And then I try not to feel guilty about the fact I'm not fitting yoga in, even though I know it's really good for me.
But we can't be perfect, and actually letting go of that is as much as anything. And I think I remember watching my sister left her finance career a couple of years ago and retrained as a teacher. And she worked so hard. My goodness me, she worked harder than I've ever worked. And she cared so deeply. And I think learning how to not be perfect, learning that it was fine for something to be good enough, was a really important part of that journey. I mean, she'll probably tell me something entirely different, and that I'm misrepresenting her. But I think from the outside, that certainly seemed the case to me. I'm going to ask you, I'm loving the comment about strapping the router to my hip, and I'm going to investigate the technology for that. But I'm going to ask you, Emma, about, you've obviously been around a lot of early career teachers. And I'm just curious whether you've seen any of them with habits or approaches or routines that you thought, that's really smart, that's really practical, and a really good way of organizing yourself.
There's some obvious ones around kind of setting specific times that you use your email, for example. So one of the worst things any of us can do in any job we're in is have email constantly making a noise on our screen every time you have one come through, for example, your phone or wherever you put it. And as a teacher, you have times where you have to be in the classroom, and times where you want to do your paperwork side of things, your communications and your emails. But having very specific times, and the advice is always, and the people I see who manage this really smartly, are to have two sets of half an hour or an hour, whatever you need, one in the morning, one at the end of your working day, whenever the end of your working day is. And making those, not having it switched on, and not allowing the notifications to come up on your phone or anywhere else, because as soon as you see the notification, it becomes an earworm that starts wriggling away. I must respond to that. So having those specific times, having conversations with your, the early career teachers who I see managing the best are the ones that are asking for help all the time. The bravest thing you can say is, help, I'm struggling with, or I would like some help with, or could you support me with? And identifying those people in school, who, some of them might be your formal mentor, but there will be other people you come across who've got those nuggets of wisdom, who can tell you where to get the laminating sheets from that no one else knows about, or where the glue sticks are hidden, or whatever it might be that you need. That these small stresses that add up to quite a lot when you're managing a busy workload as a teacher. I would always say, avoid the mood hoovers. So that, there is, not every staff room has one, but some staff rooms have those people who are perhaps less enthusiastic about their careers for whatever reason, and are always wanting to say the negative things. Smile politely, get your cup of tea, and move to the other side of the staff room. Just avoid the mood hoover in your staff room. The ones that I wish, I didn't do this very well, but the early career teachers who I see really kind of making their way, and I think that, you've got this sussed, is they will sit down and look at their list of tasks and ask themselves really key questions. And the key questions are, is this going to make a real difference to my pupils? Yeah. Is it going to make a real difference to me as a teacher? And if they can say yes to those questions, then they prioritize those tasks. If not, then they perhaps don't prioritise them, and they can be left for another day. And I think that's a really smart move, is to really think, why are we here? It's to make a difference to the teachers, and to make a difference to the teachers, I need to do the best I can be in my profession. So if this task is going to either make a difference to the kids or make a difference to me as a professional, then I'll prioritise it. But otherwise, I can probably leave it till tomorrow.
I mean, I think that is such an important point for everybody, and actually at every stage in your career, learning to set and hold a boundary, to decide what's important and then stick to it, to learn to say no. This is stuff that takes people years to do. And if my younger self would probably be a lot healthier if she had, the attitude to that I have now. So I think that's really, really important advice for people to think about, and actually to have the confidence, because I think one of the things that I've learned over the years is the work goes on forever. There's no end to the work, and if I ever imagine completing it, well, that's that will drive me mad, because I'll never get there. And so that your point about just deciding on the priorities, is it going to really make a difference? I think having that thought process and knowing that that's a really legitimate way to think about your work. I mean, you can say it is now because Emma said it, so it must be a good way to do it. And I think the other thing that I notice a lot with early career teachers in particular is sleep. I think it can be very difficult to get enough rest, partly because people are starting early and finishing late, and having the kind of putting in place the sort of routines that kind of calm and relax you. Remembering you may not want to read at the end of the day, you might have had enough of it, but reading is a tremendously relaxing, genuinely for soothing us, is a really easy low-tech pursuit if you do it off paper. You may have heard of books. They're like an early version of the tablet. I think finding those things that are going to be soothing is really important to end the day. I certainly know that, my kids who have quietened down a little bit are 10 and 8. And I would much rather that their teachers went into class in the morning having had a great night. Maybe they've done some work, but they've also had a bit of crack, they've seen friends, or they've done something relaxing or restorative for them. And that's the energy they come in the next day with. That can be, I think, a really powerful and underestimated part of what it is to be a great teacher. That part of having looked after yourself enough that you're able to come and be present.
Absolutely.
One last thing for you, Emma, which is if you had a magic wand and you could get schools to do, a particular thing that you think would support early career teachers even better than they are now, what would you do with your magic wand?
Now, it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but bear with me, because I would be asking schools to prioritise time and space for their mentors. And the reason for that is that your mentors are going to be the most kind of important connection that you have through your early career. And if a mentor will have all of the same stresses and strains we've just been talking about, but I want the mentor to have the headspace and the clear vision to really be able to support you as an early career teacher. So if I had a magic wand and could give schools endless amounts of cash, I would be asking them to invest that in their mentors, giving their mentors kind of high value, because it's such an important job, high value, high status, and the time off their timetable to really be able to think about how to best support you as early career teachers.
Brilliant. Makes absolute sense. It's a bit like what we were saying about you shouldn't feel guilty as a teacher about looking after yourself. You'll do a better job for your pupils. And of course, mentors can do a better job if they're given the time and the space and, to be able to do that role well. Emma, thank you so much. For anyone who wants to hear more from Emma, she's on Twitter, routinely found at Hollis NASBTT. So you can look her up there and hear more words of wisdom. Thank you to everyone who tolerated the really rickety start to this session. But I just want to finish up by reminding you, anyone in education can reach out to education support. We have a raft of tools for teachers We also have our helpline, which is available 24/7. It's staffed by qualified counsellors, and it's there for anyone working in education who wants to have a conversation. You don't have to be in a crisis state to call it up. Our people are trained to have conversations. So, you know, sometimes it can be useful to choose something over with someone who's not in your workplace or not in your home life, just from time to time. Maybe they've told you were stressed and you want to discuss that with someone. Well, there's a perfect use for the helpline. And the telephone number is on our website, but it's 08000 562 561. So please use it liberally. Thank you all for joining us. Yeah, we'll wish you the best and see you again, probably with somebody else driving, I should think, from the education support side next time. But it's been a pleasure to see you tonight. Take care, Emma. Thanks a million.
Bye, Sinead. Bye.
Good luck.